In response to my last video, which was about data trees, which is about as dry as it can get for people wanting to work in Grasshopper, let's make a quick whirly-gig kind of geometric, solid-based exercise that's parametric. So what I'm going to do is immediately jump in to surfaces. I'm going to grab a geometry like a cylinder. And one thing I have to do with a cylinder when I bring it in, I may change its dimensions. I think we'll just leave it. Actually, I like to just type in 12. Then I have a nice range of 0 to 100 on whatever I do. And quickly, I'm just going to make that cylinder large. I'm going to hit my zoom extends all, right click, and now I have something to look at and see what I can do. Immediately, you'll notice cylinder has no caps. So just type caps and type cap holes. Put that in. That's the geometry we're going to be dealing with. And as you move along this script, you might want to take preview off the previous one. So this script, what we're going to do is we are going to move it. And the first thing I'm going to do to make another data path for it, or another layer of what's on there, I want you to periodically have a param viewer and see what you're dealing with. Right now we have one branch with one item. Fair enough. So let's take it and let's do a move. And what I'm going to do through the move is go to transformations, the squirrely little jumpy snake. You could do a linear array, but let's not. Let's just do a move so we understand it. Let's move that geometry in a motion in the x-axis, and we will move it in the x-axis through a range in the math tools. This is something, range comes in sequence. Put it through a range. It will default to certain things. Let's at least know the steps of that range are 2 to 10. So I just typed in 2 and it'll go from 1 to 10. There's our steps up to 10. The domain is defaulted, but let's go to maths and create our own domain. Create a domain and say, okay, I want to move this in respect to those sizes and values around 12 units. We'll just leave it as that. I want to move that from 0 to 12. And now you can see it's kind of needs to be separated so I can see it. And I'm definitely going to have to downsize the radius of this so I can start to separate. And there's my circus. Yeah, my circus. There's my circles I call. So there they are, data range. I have a bunch of data now. Now, what are we dealing with? Let's leave that one and let's just move right along and say, what do we have now? Well, look, we have one branch with 11 items. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to move those items up into another. Actually, we're going to take it through a rotate into our transformations. And this is where we're going to get into radians or dimensions. If you don't understand radians, I want you to kind of figure it out. Go on to a math site and have some fun with that. We're going to rotate 3D. We're going to take these geometries. We're also going to rotate them through the center, which will default to 0, 0, 0. So whenever you see things defaulting to 0, 0, 0, obviously you want that point. And you're going to be using that point throughout your script constantly. So let's leave it up here. And there's our range, and it's saying, what's the angle? Now, you could go in here and type degrees and type your angles. If you click that over degrees, you can type a number slider from 1 to 360, and you get 360 degrees. I like that it's set to radians, and I like to think in maths and what pi actually implies. And so when you pull out pi and put it in, you now can have how many rotations of pi you want, and I will take it from 0, decimal, 2.00, and that is basically writing pi. It will rotate from 0 to 2 pi, but I want it to do it in a range. So I'm going to take it all the way up to there, but in between here, I'm going to put in another range going into sets, sequence, range, item, with the same number of steps, which is counted here. And the domain is actually going to go through another domain in maths. This is such a simple exercise to practice, and I would recommend it. You're going to go from 0 to 2 pi. And now you have a range of data that's taking that and saying, okay, I'm going to take each one of those items and put it all the way through there as it goes. And now if I graph that and put all my data on one branch, and you'll see what happens here, it goes to all these things have to move independently. And I have a lot more geometries. Try to understand what's happening when you flatten. Try to understand, actually, you don't have to flatten this information when you leave it as it was, or you take it up to graphed. And I'm going to deal with it as a regular non-grafted form. And I'm going to take up everything else and say off. And there we go. I've got a nice little range happening. And if I step up my step count from 10 to, let's say, edit, go in and change your step count, roll it up by this dialer to 30, I actually able to put in a lot more little tiny circles as we go through and get some cool geometries. Now what I want to do is that data is actually recorded as, let's put it into a param viewer again. I have, and you'll see the paths being built. And now I have one branch with 12 items. And what we're going to do to those 12 items that go through is you'll see that actually we've gotten an extra one in there because the range has added it. Let's see how many steps are here. 11 values, as opposed to here, the steps were still 11. Oh, actually, I'm sorry, I moved it up to 11. Everything will stay the same unless you introduce a series. Series, you'll have to play with moving that number up or down. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move these again in a z-axis up. It will default in the z-axis, but it'll take the whole geometry and lift it up 10. Well, I do want to move it up in the z-axis, but when I do that, I want to do the exact same thing. I want to go into sets, sequences, grab another range of data, and I just missed it. Range of data, bring it in, and say I want to bring it through a range, the same amount of steps, so everything's parametric, slide it into the steps, bring in another domain. Go back into your maths, grab your domain, and now what's the height of what you want this to move? Well, I want that domain to go, I'm going to type in 12, so get a number slider between 0 and 100, and there we go. Now I can move these geometries up like that. Very interesting. Let's take off the past geometry preview off, and we're flying here at 6 minutes. I love this exercise. And now you're saying, well, I want more jazz. I want more funk. I want more stuff. I want 30 in between there. There's your steps moving up, and there's your rotating, expanding, ranged, wonderful thing, building this stairway to the sky. Change your radius to not be its height. Sorry, I didn't mean to delete that. Cut paste, and now let's have them be different. So let's take the radius and say we want something much more flatter. So I've got these strange round staircases as they climb in the air. Now I don't know if I want to do that. I want to think separate and geometric, and the range is changing as I go, and it's getting progressively larger, but you're building a sculptural. Now what can I do to this? Let's take all that data, and let's say, but I want to rotate on that. Now those geometries independently all have a volume. So if I go to surface and go to volume tool, I can pull out the centroid of each one. And now if you're looking, I have the point. So now I can do a rotate 3D. And this is an exercise really. Aaron Schmidt, try it out. You're going to love it. We're going to take that geometry. We're going to rotate it around these centers. We're going to use the angle similar to the structure of this one. You can just hit select, take this data, this data, this data, this data, copy it, or you could plug into that data, but I want it to be different. I'm going to take that pi rotation with the same cut and put it into angle. And now what I have is this ability. Watch my little suckers if I go onto here. Actually, they are rotating. And you're like, well, I don't see them rotating. But watch this. As I'm rotating, they are rotating. But they're rotating around the z-axis that's going up. And an axis is a line. So to build a quick line, here's how I do it. I go into vectors, and I say, well, I want it to rotate around the x-axis. Or I can build another type of vector. But this one, I'm going to keep it simple and say I'm going to use the x unit direction. I'm going to go into lines, and I'm going to build a primitive of a start line, start direction line length. So I'm going to say the start is, and then we'll go back to where the start on each one will be, is the centroid. The direction will be the x direction, and we have a line that's very tiny. We could make it longer so we could see it very easily, which is like visualizing a vector, and there it is. But those are the directional lines we're going to make as the axis, and now we have something totally different. And here we go. We go in, and we're like, holy cow, I can actually take those and rotate them on different levels of what's happening. So each one of those is rotating through a range. And as we look at it as the whole object, you'll see one of them as we go through the range. We can look at the data if you want. Let's go back here and say, okay, here's where our geometries. That's what was coming out. Let's grab another param viewer. Sorry, it's small to see, but I'm talking fast because I'm a fast talker. And now we have 31 items on one branch. We keep going. We have those lines. We can add those up, the centroids. We have geometries here. And what we have here, let's put on another param viewer. And you can look in panel if you can understand that. We still have those 31 items on there. But what is happening to that pattern as it rotates? It's rotating a little bit at the start because it's a range, amplified by a range. And here we go. As we turn it, they all kind of turn around into full. The first ones don't turn too much because they have a range from going from 0 up to 0.73 or up to 1. But I'm going to take the full rotation. So they start and they do a nice rotate. Now at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go back in to here and say my radii is not only a number. I'm going to go one step farther. We're at 9 minutes. Back into sets, back into sequence, back into range. Throw that in there as a range of radii. I'm going to put it into a domain in my maths. This is such a repetitive, fun exercise. And I will take that, and we'll need to know the steps of what we're doing in the radii. But we can take those steps and run them through right here. If I have this tool on, I can see what I'm actually clicking. I have a range of actually radii of what's happening. But I want the range of these to be very high. So there we go. Now I have something totally interesting. As I leave it, I come out and I'm like, oh my gosh, I just blew it up. And we're going to take it from 100, obviously, down to something decent. And there it is, a full range of what can happen. But our step count still isn't the original step count. So I need to pull back the steps of 30 so it applies and put that step into these steps in range. You get in the habit of doing this, and you get some really nice, wonderful things. Now, we've got enough of this geometry to play with and say that's a cool little object, and that's fun to play with. So let's take it over into Artistic, have a look at it. There we go. We're looking at more than just the final data at 10 minutes. So we're going to take off everything but that final little geometry. And I'm going to do one other thing as I go. I'm going to take off the geometry, preview off. We have our objects right there. Really, friends, go on, try this. It's outstanding to get into this habit. Move your function out. There it is. You can group it. Now, what I'm going to do is I want you to be able to follow the script. I want you to be able to read it left to right and know what is happening there. Know why that's parametric, why things change, how I move this, how I rotate it with simple radians and pies. How can I have full parametric control over this incredible varied step? And what I'm going to introduce now is wherever there's a range, I'm going to throw in a jitter node. And you're like, what is jitter? Jitter takes the data, throws it in a jumbly bingo box. Type in jitter. We're going to use a lot of them. Here we go. Jitter. And we're going to take that data and we're going to Shazam it. And we're going to put that back into where it was the angle. And there you go. It's now behaving totally different. I have an effect from 0 to 1. So get in the habit of typing in 1.00, and you have a jitter effect of kind of strength on the jitter. How much do you want to jitter those numbers? Now do the same thing. Take this and move this back to the last thing you had a range in, which is right here. Let's jitter that data. Take those values, put it in there. Bam! This is a little too much. I've just lost control of my form. The jitter's a little much, so I'm going to put in 1.00, and I'm not going to jitter that information too much. Right now it's set at 1. I'm going to bring it back and put it back into kind of an organized structure. But it does have an effect of blasting out. So now I'm going to keep my jitter, save that, cut and paste it, move it back to my next range of where I used it. And I used it again here. So let's pull it in here. Let's pop it in here. Bam! We got some more. What happens when I move that jitter? All of a sudden, I got different control on that. Same thing. Cut, paste. Move it back to the next one. And here's another range. Pull it in here. Pop your motion in here. This video should go viral. This one's awesome. And I'm slowing down a little bit here. Let me just grab that. Pull it down here. I'm going to pull that jitter in. Override that one. There we go. I got another jittered effect on changing that data as to what it is. And then, as we're watching the timer at 12 minutes, I'm going to select both, cut, paste, bring it back to the first one. The range comes into my list. My values go into radius, and there we go. I can play with the change of the radius, which will really start to blast things open. I can move it around like this. And the best thing to do now, which is just nuts, as I build this geometry, is play with those original numbers of how many's in the set. If I want more, I can go to edit. I can scroll up to 60, bring this up to 60. There's 60 objects all jittered together into a pattern. And you're like, what is that whirlwind of forms? And let's take a look at it in XYZ by Zoom Extends All. There it is as a geometry that I've actually got total control. And now, Aaron Schmidt, take your cylinder and say, I don't want cylinders. Go to surface. Grab yourself a sphere. I don't care what you grab yourself. Let's take the values of this for the radii. Let's take this object and pop it in here, and boom, everything turns to spheres. You get a morel mushroom, you put in another one. You put in another mesh. You get anything off the internet. You got total and absolute control. One other thing in the last minute and a half, take this item that's final, grab the whole thing, go into transformations, go into polar array, which is absolutely outstanding. Take your count down to 3, which would be from 0 to 10. Put the count in there, do your polar array, and make sure you do your polar array around, and I just did too much of one. You can see I've got this crazy geometry that's happening in 3 versions of this data, and really get in here and play with it. You've got something you've created. The geometries are there. I can change them if I want. I'll take preview off. If I went in here, I've got 3 sets of data, I believe. Well, you've got a lot. You've got all of them, but they're in. If you look at them, how they're displayed, and I got to wrap this up in a minute, you'll see that you actually have 61 branches with 3 items on each. Think of flipping that data, and you're able to grab different things. So what I'm going to do is go into sets, grab a list item. There's my list item. There's my objects in my first set. And since there's 3 sets, I can just type in 2. 2 is an integer slider, and I can grab each one of those sets of data. This set, and this set. If you don't understand that, watch it again and learn it. I got to wrap it up. 30 seconds. Throw it in turntable. Change your. Everything's parametric. Everything is changeable. You have total jittered control over some awesome transformations. I hope some people really enjoy that video. I enjoyed making it. That's the speed of how my mind works. When I'm looking at this, it gets more and more complex, and I can slow down more and more. Thanks very much for watching. There you go.